Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to episode 2 of the Lights, Camera, Grow podcast. If this is your first time joining us, don't forget to subscribe. Make sure you catch episode 1. In episode 2 of this series, Andrew and I dive into the nuts and bolts of what it takes to make one of these cool marketing videos. We go from pre-production, production, all the way through editorial, and we give you all the details about it. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe to the Lights, Camera, Grow podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or anywhere you catch a podcast. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Lights, Camera, Grow podcast. I'm Jared. I'm here with Andrew again. We are on episode 2 of this series. This time we're going to dive into the nuts and bolts and everything it takes to actually produce the video for your video marketing strategy. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it, Andrew.
Yeah, so for those of you who are just joining us on maybe the second series of this whole second episode of this whole series, we've decided to take a slightly different format, and we're just focusing on everything related to video and growth marketing and sales this time around. So I guess we talked a lot about maybe the bigger picture part of like why video is so important.
Right.
How do you actually make the damn thing now?
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I guess if you could break it down from like the highest level, how would you break up the pipeline? Like, what are the stages of actually making a video?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something that I think gets skipped over quite a bit. If you've been around anything that's like TV production or movie production, these steps are very, very similar, if not identical. There's 3 basic phases. There's pre-production, which is everything that goes into planning the shoot. There's production, which is everything that involves actually completing the shoot. And then there's post-production, which is editorial, sound, anything that happens to put the thing till final delivery. So those are like the 3 major steps that I would say you need to always take. You can, of course, skip one if you like, but your journey is going to be kind of rough.
So what to you is the most important step?
And I think we actually touched on this in the last episode. Pre-production is by far the most important step. I'll use a sports analogy. All the best teams, their practices are usually better than their game plan. With great practice and great planning, on game day, you're ready to go, right? So pre-production is super important. And this is what you would think of a lot of times as just like scheduling and planning, but it's actually a lot more involved than that. This is things like just trying to think about every detail that you're going to face and try to like foolproof yourself, as you will, for the production shoot. So I would say pre-production is definitely the most important step.
Awesome. So within pre-production, like you've mentioned a few of the different elements of it, but how do you properly plan pre-production? Like what's your step-by-step process to go through?
So I think each project, of course, is going to be a little bit different. I think for what we're talking about in the context of video marketing, the number one thing is to always figure out what the objective is of the video.
And what are examples of objectives?
So are we telling a story about a company? Are we telling a story about a person? Are we shooting to market a product or a service?
Trying to get a click on a Facebook ad?
Yeah, exactly. Right? So if you know, the clearer that objective is, the easier the pre-production actually becomes. Because it weeds out a lot of those questions and a lot of the things that may just lead you in the wrong direction.
What about looking at the audience and understanding?
Absolutely.
Audience, right?
And that just comes with great like brand strategy in general, and just good marketing strategy in general. Looking at the audience, trying to figure out who that specific persona is that you really want to gauge your production towards.
And so once you've kind of nailed down the audience, the objective of the video, where does the planning go from there?
The next step would definitely be the messaging or the storytelling, if you will. That is, I don't know. I guess that's the most important part, because just because you know who you're selling to or marketing to, or you know where this video is going to reach to, doesn't mean that you're getting the point across properly. So I think making sure that messaging is really intact is probably the key to everything. Everything kind of like flows down from that.
Yep.
And that's just like anything. If you've ever looked at a Hollywood movie, any of the blockbusters that you like, let's take Jurassic Park for an example. The book was great, the script was great, the movie was great.
Right.
So and obviously there's things that do fall apart, but for the most part, like that story is intact.
So how does I guess my question here is like, how does the messaging, the objective, all of that stuff, what does it manifest itself into? Like during pre-production, is it a script?
Yeah,
is
so
it a
ends
storyboard.
Well, it's kind of a little bit of both. It ends up ultimately being the script.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't put it down in words on paper, chances are it's not going to work anyway. So script writing, copywriting, things like that, just like they would on a website, are super important.
Right.
And all that homework that you've done, figuring out why and when you're telling the story and who for, goes into that script writing and the messaging.
Okay.
And then from there, it goes into a storyboard, because once you figure out your script of who's kind of like going to be talking on camera, the feeling, things like location start to come into play.
Right.
Now that we have this feeling that we're trying to get across, what does that feeling look like?
Right.
We already know what it sounds like and what the messaging sounds like.
Right.
How do we make it look?
Right. So when you talk storyboard, I think some folks, when they hear storyboard out there, they literally think like
comic strip storyboarding.
Yeah,
right.
like a proper, like,
Right.
it's like you have an actual artist drawing things out, like not animating, but sketching out like what that scene will look like, who's doing what, where are people positioned. If you don't have the time or the budget to do that, how do you accomplish the objective?
Yeah, and two key points, time and budget, are always like you're up against those, right?
Yep.
Mainly time.
Yep.
Budget is always a challenge, but you can get over budget. There's ways to get around budget. But time, you can't get around time.
Sure.
So that's a great question. The storyboard then ends up becoming more of a blocking out. Like you're touching on, and this can be written. This doesn't have to be drawn. Obviously, if you have illustrated, like your typical Hollywood type storyboards, like in major commercials, they still do that.
Yep.
And they sometimes even take it a step further with an animatic, which is an animated version of the storyboard.
I see,
so you can see things in motion.
Yep.
But let's say you don't have time for that. Writing things down on paper like, hey, Glenn is going to stand camera left in this shot, and then we're going to cut and go to the side of the street in this shot. Those both, it can work. It can still work. It doesn't need to be drawn out or illustrated. Stick figures work great too. So if you're not a great illustrator, you can't use those.
And I think even us, we kind of take like a similar approach where we build a shot list, essentially. Right?
Yeah, that would be kind of like the next evolution of the storyboard.
Yep.
I think we take it a little step further. We go in either the actual location tech scout, and we'll take a bunch of photography or videos, and then we'll put like a preliminary edit together, or just do screenshots of that and make that shot list like you're saying and describe kind of like what's going to happen in each shot. Or we'll go into an environment. Say we're going to fly out and we don't have a chance to fly out before and do this. We'll do it somewhere local that's going to be similar and still kind of block out those things, just so that when we show up on the day of production, we're not running around like trying to figure out where we're going to point the camera, because you already have enough to think about, right? Like directing talent, is hair and makeup, working? Is the sound good? And a lot of times we're not on the Hollywood budget, so it is like a 2-3 man show, at the most.
So this is the legwork that goes into saying like, okay, we can't shoot from this angle because at 12 o'clock, the sun is like right smack in our face.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So those are the kind of things that you want to plan or figure out during pre-production so that when you show up and you've only got a limited amount of time on production day where you're actually shooting behind the camera, that you're not dicking around.
Exactly.
Like, shit, find a new place.
We don't have the luxury of reshoots most of the time. We've got like one day to really get it right. A lot of times it's just that one day. So I always think of pre-production as like, if I do all these steps right, it's like having an extra set of hands on set.
Right.
Because I don't have to think about it, or an extra mind on set, because I don't have to think about it. I just pull the shot list out of my pocket, I look at it, and I'm like, okay, this is exactly what we need to do next.
Yep.
And I don't have to ask somebody or try to go back in a bunch of weird notes and think about it. So the more organized you can be in the front end of this, you know, obviously the better and smoother it goes. You're still going to have hiccups. There's no way to, you know, avoid these things. You're going to run into problems. You can't account for the guy who's standing in the background at all times, right? Like you're not going to be able to account for that. But yeah, the more you can kind of plan this out, things like location, you know, is this going to be inside? Is it going to be outside? Where's the lighting going to be? If we're not going to use artificial lighting, you know, if we're going to use natural light, where's that light going to be coming through? Are there weird shadows? You know, all these kind of things that you would never, you can think about while you're there, but they're really hard to tackle in the moment if you haven't at least thought about planning for them.
Sure. So on the, like, let's move on to production. Like, let's say you did a bang up job during pre-production. You've built the storyboard, you've got your shot list, you've got everything, you got your location, you've got someone coordinating all that stuff for you. So talk about production. What happens during production? Okay, so production is the day of the shoot. Yep, because I think a lot of people think production is like the whole thing. Sure. Right? Sure. But production is actually a very specific part of the whole thing. Yeah. Right?
So for production itself, it's the day of the shoot. We go early. We're going to set up our lighting if we need to. We're going to have hair and makeup ready to go with our talent. Make sure, you know, we test equipment, make sure mics, lenses, cameras are all working. Always have a backup plan. Always run 2 things of audio because you never know when the mic's going to cut out.
And actually, Jared's mentioned hair and makeup a couple of times throughout this, throughout our recording here. And there's a reason for that, because it's one of those things that you'll probably get like the highest ROI on. Right? Because there's so many times where if you knew, oh, my shirt's wrinkled here or my hair's out of place there, that it just throws the whole shot off. And if someone was there just completely focused on making sure that wardrobe is right, hair and makeup is right, because there's nobody there that's going to be on set that's going to be paying attention.
I mean, if you're working in the production, and again, if you're in a small team like we are, you know, like usually I'm behind the camera and I'm trying to direct the talent, and then Oz is usually helping me with the other camera, and he's helping me direct the background talent or whatnot. Or we're both checking lighting and we're checking the color balance of making sure that our cameras are aligned, things like that. Stuff that you take for granted on a huge film production because there's one person for each one of these jobs that you kind of just get folded up and, you know, you have to wear multiple hats.
So it's like a $200 or $300 a day expense.
Yeah, it's totally worth it.
Like save you a bunch of headache and heartache. Like,
and
later.
On top of that, it's great. Look, it makes the client feel good.
Sure.
You know, who doesn't want to get dolled up and, you know, like, and look your best before you go in front of the camera. So that's, you know, that's definitely a key point that, you know, it can get overlooked very easily and get cut out of the budget pretty quickly.
So moving on to the sort of final part of this, you're on set, you shoot everyone stressed out, they're running around like chickens with their heads cut off, but you get all the shots you need, you're done for the day or the 2 days or however many days you're shooting. What happens after production? So first thing I do is back up all the media. I'm super like scared and always anal about, we got to make sure we have 3 copies of everything because, I mean, we've all heard that horror story. Like I lost, you know, this file, or my dog ate the homework, right? That's like this 2019's version of that. And the worst thing, again, like I said, we don't have a lot of time to go back. And most of the time we don't have reshoots with clients. They don't have the budget or the time. And it's a lot of effort for people that don't necessarily want to be on camera. And most of the times these people aren't getting paid to be on camera. Exactly. Right? And they don't want to come back to do it because it's hard enough for them to do it the first time normally, right? So and that's something we didn't touch on, and I think I'll touch on that in a second, is just like dealing with like the talent, right? Which is really, really difficult. So the first thing we do is back up all the footage. And then from there, it just goes into our streamlined editing process. We'll transcode all of the media, which means basically just make it editable, you know, like slicing clips, down-resing things if we shoot in 4K or higher, because it gets pretty heavy on the computer side.
And then we just start editing, and we do everything in Adobe, in the Adobe suite. So our graphics package is always After Effects with Photoshop or Illustrator, and then we use Adobe Premiere to do all the editing, and we do all our coloring inside of DaVinci Resolve, which is a coloring suite separate. You don't have to use that; it's just what I prefer and what our pipeline works for. So
let me ask you something. So most of the folks who are probably listening out there, they don't have an in-house team to edit and color and, finish the rest of the video, right? So
hire us.
Yeah. So let's say, I think a lot of folks will probably outsource work to a team, right? How do you think about outsourcing work? If, let's say, you are the marketing manager of a brand.
Right.
And you're like, I need a video, but there's no way I can do pre-production, production, post. Or maybe I can handle the pre-production part, but I hire a team to do production and post.
Right.
How do you see that team working together, and how would you recommend that team work together, right? Because, and I guess what I'm trying to get at is that, does the editor need to talk to the guy on production who's on set? Like, how does that whole dynamic sort of work?
That's a great question, and it can be a black hole if you're not in the right if you're not in the right mindset or in thought process of it, because it can be really scary. You've just spent all this money shooting this, and you're just handing it off to somebody that may not be there, or just building that team in general can be really scary.
Right. Because I guess what I'm trying to get at is that a lot of people are going to try and do it cheap. Which means they're going to try and cut some corners and say, okay, like, I don't want the editor to be involved during pre-production or the whoever's going to be on set and, the direct, whoever's on set going to be directing everything. It's not there during pre-production. Maybe I'm going to cut some hours out there, but why might that be a bad idea?
So I think that if you're going to handle pre-production inside, let's say you're not outsourcing that. And I think at minimum, you need to at least have the people that are going to be there during the production. Whoever's going to be shooting the video, running audio. Audio can be left to the side. It's not necessary, but it's nice to have them. But just to have the pieces that are going to be there on set in that meeting ahead of time, so that they know any curveballs that are coming ahead.
And tell the audience, like, what's the name of that person who leads everything on set? It's the DP.
Oh, so okay, that's a great. So normally on a film set, that's the AD, which is the assistant director. Right. So you have your director who's pointing talent out and actually working with the talent, calling the shots, who's kind of in charge of the entire production. And then the AD, which is the assistant director, is usually in charge of kind of going back and forth between the director and the client. But again, that's usually one person. That's usually the same guy who's shooting the video, especially in a lot of these smaller productions.
So make sure that AD is included during pre-production, right? Because it's going to save you money down the road.
Which, in terms of most people, this is going to be your videographer, is what people call it.
Right.
But make sure your videographer is there when you're planning it out. Maybe they have some thoughts about, especially if they're local and they understand the area, maybe they have some thoughts about the location that you're shooting at, why you should or shouldn't use that place.
So even though, like, if you're out there and you're thinking about hiring and outsourcing a team to create a video, there's like 3 very distinct parts of the pipeline, but someone who works in the pipeline later in the pipeline probably needs to be involved earlier in the pipeline. It'll make their job easier.
I wouldn't say you have to necessarily have editorial involved. I mean, if you can afford it, that's great, but it's not necessary to have that involved. If you've done your job in step 1 and step 2, then step 3 should be pretty easy. It should be straightforward, at least.
Let's talk maybe a little bit about, like, you've created this video. Right? When you're in the editorial process, you're in edit, right? Do you typically go in there saying, I want a 2-minute edit out of this thing, I want a 5-minute edit? Do you know that already going into the edit, or do you kind of like look at what you got and figure it out from there?
Okay, so this is a great question. I usually go into it pretty open-minded. I'm not going to nail myself to it unless we have restrictions, right? So if it's if it's a television commercial, you're 15, 30, 45, 60, that's all you get. Right?
Exactly.
So
that's what you're paying for.
But most of the video we're talking about goes online. So we're not restricted by that boundary. I usually go into it open-minded because I like to see how the story unfolds. And sometimes there's things in there that you either really need or you really don't need. I usually have a rough estimate in my head, like, okay, I was there on set and I'm shooting. I can feel that this probably shouldn't be longer than 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes, etc. But as I'm going through edit, things are moving faster than I remember, or things are moving slower than I remember, and that really, starts to make the pace of the video go faster or slower. So pacing in the edits becomes key because that's really what's dictating the outcome of the entire thing.
Yep.
And then it depends on your client as well. There's certain things that they may want or not want in the edit.
Yep.
But I would say what really drives that is, where's this thing going to live?
Right.
So if you're like, hey, this is going to be a YouTube pre-roll ad, well, great. We have 6 or 7 minutes. We could actually go to 10 minutes if it's really good, right?
Yeah, totally.
But just keep in mind, everybody's attention span is really limited these days.
Yep.
The shorter and faster you can get your message in front of them and that point driven, the better ROI you're going to get on the end of the video, which is the objective, right? And that goes all the way back up to the front of the pre-production. Why are we doing this video?
Yeah, sure.
Right?
So that's interesting. Which it makes sense because what you get in production is what you're going to be able to work with in the edit. Right?
Yeah, there's been times where we're like, shit, we're short. This thing, I need it to at least be a minute. You got to go hit some pickup shots, or you got to make some B-roll. So, for one client, we had to go shoot a bunch of stock footage style B-roll for it to add into the back end of it, just to make the story work better. A lot of times we don't charge for that because we want the product to be good. So we'll just go out in the backyard and shoot whatever extra shots we need, to really make the story work. And that's important too, right?
It's I think that's actually a really good point that, as much as you do your pre-production and your planning, you're still really riffing on the day of the production.
Yeah, it's still art.
It's still very kind of fly by the seat of your pants thing. Although we try to control what we can control around that. Obviously,
luckily, again,
pre-production.
There's good and bad of the small production unit. The good is we can always we can afford to take more shots.
Yep.
We can afford to stay longer on set.
Yep.
We can afford to go pick up B-roll, right? Because it's not costing hundreds of thousands to go over.
Yep.
When you're on a big production, every minute is burning money. So, there's pros and cons, but we don't have all the extra hands.
Somebody's P&L is getting hit.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I did want to touch on before we go too far into the next topic is I just wanted to go back to the talent aspect. Because I think it can be overlooked and it can be really scary.
And it's the biggest wild card.
It is the biggest. It's totally. It's like you can't control it.
Yeah.
Right? Unless you're hiring
weather, right?
Sure. Unless you're hiring talent and you're hiring actors and actresses.
Even if you're hiring talent.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. But but if you're hiring, chances are they're probably experienced and they're better off in front of camera. But a lot of times our clients, the people who are running the businesses that we're working with, are the people in front of the camera. So to make yourself approachable and make sure that the way you're getting what you want to get out of them across, you have to build some rapport with them.
Yeah, I think it's so the word I always use are these soft skills.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
You gotta have you gotta be able to get them to feel comfortable when they're uncomfortable.
Right, exactly.
That's essentially what it is,
because if I want to David Fincher the shot and get to take 99,
I
want to make sure they don't want to rip my head off.
Right, exactly.
But it's just, it's a communication skill. And I think it's just something that, it doesn't get too much credit in our industry. Obviously, in film direction, it's completely different. But in what we do, a lot of times it gets overlooked because people are like, oh, I'm just going to put the camera on you and it's going to be magic. Yeah. And it's not. A lot of times it's not.
Definitely. There's no such thing as movie magic.
Yeah.
This is a lot of hard work.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Yeah.
All right. So maybe we can wrap on this last piece, which is...
No pun intended. The film wrap.
We just made this cool fucking video.
Yep.
Now what do we do with it?
Yeah, great question.
So we made it. We got to publish it. We got to get eyeballs on it. Give our listeners some ideas around where they can put it out there, what they should use it for. Right?
First thing I would say is going back to pre-production. Again, this is that important step, right? I would imagine that as you're building the strategy for this video, you've already started to think about where this needs to live.
Yep.
And a lot of times it is because you're like, okay, we're going to do this 1 minute Facebook ad video or this Instagram ad video or stories or whatever. So that should already be taken into account. But if you're doing a more general type video, like an About Us video that may live on multi-platforms, there's all kinds of different places that you can put this thing. Free, obviously, is always a great way to go. You have Vimeo and YouTube. You can just create an account and upload it there and share it as you want.
Sure.
But if you want to get more metrics, I guess you would just, for lack of a better word, and on what's actually happening to the video, services like Vidyard and Wistia are great. We personally use Wistia in our agency. But Vidyard, I think, actually has the same metric counting ability. But these give you like crazy metrics. So you're not just getting total plays. You're actually getting down to the minute engagement. Like how long are people staying on this video at this particular point? How many times have they come back to play this video at this particular point?
And the great thing from a marketing standpoint is all that is data that can be passed through an API. And what that means, if you use a marketing automation software, is that you can trigger automations based on the data that has been gathered from the video. So for an example of an automation could be if this person watched 80% or more of a particular like product video, for example, send an email to the sales rep to let them know that they've watched this video more than 80%, which is awesome context for the salesperson to say, holy crap, this person just watched, 3 out of 3.5 minutes of our like product overview video. They probably might be a little bit interested. Maybe I should send them an email to see if they would like a demo or something like that, right? So that contextual information on the video now can now be passed to your sales team, which is a really powerful thing if you only want your sales team focused on people who are showing intent.
Exactly. I think another thing, let's just say you take that same data, the 80%, and now you give that to your creative team, and you're like, hey, at 3 minutes and 15 seconds, this is where we're getting the hotspot of the traffic, right? So now you can figure out what's actually being said in that part of the video. And you're like, hey, look, the messaging is working really well.
Smart.
Let's create more content around this particular spot of the video.
So that's like a data-driven creative in a lot of ways, right?
So it gives you more an idea of, what's actually capturing attention.
For sure.
So I think that, the data is great to have. Obviously, these platforms aren't cheap. They're pretty expensive.
Like examples like Wistia is $99 a month.
To start out.
Versus a $9.99 a month on Vimeo for a premium Vimeo account.
Vimeo will give you some of those metrics on that premium account, but you don't get the API connections and some of the sweeter stuff that you get inside.
I would say that if you're going to invest in video marketing, buy a video hosting platform that's going to support your video marketing efforts. And those are things like Vidyard or Wistia, which allow that data to be passed through to Pardot or HubSpot or whatever marketing automation platforms or your CRM that you need. So, pro tip, I guess.
It's definitely worth the buy if you're going to invest in video that heavily. And I guess just to kind of wrap it up on the final note, we love making cool videos. Right? But I'll caveat that saying we don't make cool videos to make cool videos. We make cool videos with intent. And they have a reason behind them, And you can always anybody can make a cool video, but to make a cool video and actually give it some life.
So we always, when we say intent, like what is the marketing or sales goal that we're trying to achieve with this video? There's investment that goes on into it, and as a marketer and as a marketing agency owners, we love the fact that Wistia and Vidyard have these tools because now we can start to prove ROI on creative content, which was not very easy to do before. Maybe if you were able to run pre-roll ads against your video content, you're able to monetize that, but that's what not a lot of these companies are doing. They're doing it to generate leads and eventually customers, right? So
more attention, awareness.
Exactly. So there's a ton of tools out there that are available in 2019 for anyone that really wants to step up their video game. And if you have any questions, we've got the resident expert right here. So
just reach out. You can hit us up. Cool. Well, I guess that'll do it for this episode. We'll be on the next episode where we're going to tell you, now that you've made a video, what next.
Yeah. So stay tuned.
Cool. All right, guys, as always, don't forget, we will put everything in the show notes. You can follow us on social at Run with Toby, and thanks for tuning in.